I didn't just lose my husband that day. I lost my job, my reputation, and the life I thought was secure. But what hurt the most wasn't the cheating. It was how calm they were when I caught them. Like I was the problem. Like I was the inconvenience standing in their perfect little secret. And I still remember the exact moment the door opened, my heart already racing because I wasn't supposed to be there. And then I saw them. My boss pressed against the desk, my husband's hands on her like he belonged there, like I didn't exist. And for a second, nobody spoke. Not even me, because I couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't even process how my entire world collapsed in one silent moment. And then she fixed her blazer, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Since you're here, we need to discuss your performance." Like catching them together was somehow my fault. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just betrayal. This was planned, calculated, and they thought I'd walk away quietly, embarrassed, broken. But they made one mistake. They underestimated me. Hi, my name is Emily. I'm 28, and until a few weeks ago, I thought I had a stable marriage, a solid career, and a future I could actually trust. But now I realize I was living inside a lie that two people carefully built right in front of me. And the worst part is, I helped them do it without even knowing, because I worked under her for 3 years, trusted her, admired her even, while going home every night to a man I believed loved me. And looking back now, the signs were there. The late meetings, the sudden promotion she hinted at, the way my husband started acting distant but always had an excuse that somehow made sense at the time. And I ignored it all because I believed in loyalty, in marriage, in hard work paying off. But what I didn't understand was that I was surrounded by people who saw my trust as weakness. And the day I walked into that office and saw them together wasn't the beginning of the betrayal. It was just the moment I finally saw the truth. And what they didn't realize in that moment was that I wasn't going to break. I was going to make them regret everything. I wish I could say that moment in her office was the worst part, but it wasn't. It was what came next that truly broke something inside me. Because instead of panic or guilt, my boss just calmly walked behind her desk like nothing had happened, sat down, and motioned for me to close the door, while my husband stood there avoiding my eyes like a coward. And I remember my hands shaking as I pushed the door shut, still trying to convince myself this wasn't real, but there was some explanation, something that would make this make sense. But deep down, I already knew. And then she slid a folder across the desk toward me and said, "We've been reviewing your performance for a while now." Like she hadn't just been with my husband seconds ago, like I was just another problem she needed to handle. And I actually laughed for a second because it felt so unreal, like I had stepped into some twisted version of my life. And I looked at my husband, waiting for him to say something, anything, to defend me or at least acknowledge what was happening, but he just stood there, silent. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. And then she continued talking, using words like declining productivity and lack of focus. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing, because I had been one of their top performers for years, staying late, covering extra work, doing everything they asked without question. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about my job. This was about getting rid of me, cleanly, legally, without raising suspicion. And my chest tightened as I realized how long this must have been going on, how many times they must have laughed behind my back while I trusted them. And then she said the words that made it official. "We've decided to terminate your position, effective immediately." And I just sat there, numb, staring at the paper in front of me, while my entire life unraveled in real time. And what hurt more than losing the job was the way they both watched me. Like they were waiting for me to cry, to beg, to break down right there in front of them. But I didn't. I just slowly looked up at her and then at him. And in that moment, something shifted inside me because I realized they had already decided who I was in their story. The weak wife, the disposable employee, the one who would quietly disappear. But they were wrong, and I stood up, picked up the folder without saying a word, and walked out of that office with every ounce of dignity I had left, even though inside I was falling apart. And the second I stepped outside, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. Not even close. The moment I got into my car, Everything I had been holding in finally cracked, and I sat there gripping the steering wheel so hard my hands hurt, trying not to scream, trying not to completely fall apart in a parking lot where anyone could see me, because just hours ago I had a normal life, and now I had nothing. No job, no marriage, no sense of reality. And yet, somewhere under all that pain, something colder started forming, something sharper than sadness, because the more I replayed that moment in the office, the more it stopped feeling like a coincidence and started looking like a plan. And that's when I did something I never thought I would do. I stopped crying and started thinking. Really thinking, because none of it added up. The sudden performance issues, the timing, the way she was so prepared with paperwork like she had been waiting for that exact moment, and the more I connected the dots, the clearer it became that they hadn't just betrayed me. They had been setting me up for weeks, maybe months, slowly building a case to push me out while they continued whatever relationship they had behind my back. And instead of driving home like I normally would, I turned the car around and parked across the street from the building again, my heart racing, but my mind suddenly focused. Because if they thought I was just going to disappear, they clearly didn't know me at all. And I sat there, watching the entrance for almost an hour until I finally saw them walk out together, not even trying to hide it anymore, laughing about something like nothing had happened, like they hadn't just destroyed someone's life. And I felt something inside me snap. Not into anger, but into clarity, because in that moment, I realized I had something they didn't expect. I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous in a way they couldn't control. And instead of confronting them or causing a scene, I pulled out my phone and started recording, capturing every second of them together, the way he touched her, the way she leaned into him, the way they looked completely comfortable being seen. And as I watched them drive off in the same car, I made a decision that would change everything. Because if they wanted to play this game behind my back, then I was going to play it smarter, quieter, and far more carefully. And I wasn't going to react emotionally anymore. I was going to build something they could never undo, something that would hit them where it actually hurt. And as I finally drove away that day, I wasn't the same woman who walked into that office anymore, because now I wasn't just hurt, I was patient, and they had no idea what was coming next. That night, I didn't go home right away, because the thought of walking into that house, our house, made my stomach turn. So instead, I parked a few blocks away and sat in silence, replaying everything again and again. But this time, I wasn't looking for answers. I was looking for leverage, because if they had planned this so carefully, then they must have left something behind, some mistake, some detail they overlooked. And that's when I realized the one thing they underestimated the most: how much access I had. Because I had worked closely with my boss for years, I knew her habits, her schedule, even her passwords, or at least the patterns she used. And before I could second-guess myself, I drove back to the office, my key card still active since they hadn't deactivated it yet, and my heart was pounding as I walked through those familiar halls that suddenly felt so different, colder, like I didn't belong there anymore. But I didn't stop, because I knew exactly where I needed to go. And once I got to her office, I hesitated for just a second before stepping inside. The same room where everything fell apart just hours ago. And I could still picture them there, which only made me more determined. And I went straight to her desk, opened her laptop, and for a moment I thought it would be locked. But it wasn't. She had left it on sleep mode, careless, confident, thinking she had already won. And that was her first mistake, because within minutes I was in her email, her files, everything she thought was private. And what I found made my hands shake all over again, because this wasn't just an affair, this was a complete abuse of power. There were emails between them going back months, messages about me, about how to handle the situation, about building a case against me so my termination would look justified. And even worse, there were conversations about promotions, about her influencing decisions to benefit him, crossing lines that weren't just unethical, but illegal. And I quickly started forwarding everything to a secure account, taking photos, recording what I could, my mind racing but focused, because this wasn't revenge anymore. This was evidence. And the deeper I went, the more I realized how arrogant they had been, how sure they were that I would never fight back. And when I finally stepped out of that office again, hours later, I wasn't shaking anymore, because now I had something real, something powerful. And for the first time since that morning, I smiled because they thought they had destroyed me. But in reality, they had just handed me everything I needed to destroy them. The next few days were the hardest part, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I had to act like everything was normal while quietly setting their entire world on fire, piece by piece. And instead of confronting them or exposing everything immediately, I did something they would never expect. I got a lawyer. A really good one. And when I finally sat across from him and laid everything out, the affair, the wrongful termination, the emails, the abuse of power, he didn't even hesitate. He just looked at me and said, "This is bigger than you think." And that's when I realized this wasn't just personal anymore. This was legal, serious, and very, very damaging for them. And over the next week, we built a case that connected everything: conflict of interest, workplace misconduct, retaliation, wrongful termination, and every piece of evidence I had only made it stronger. And then came the part I had been waiting for, because instead of going directly to court, my lawyer filed formal complaints with HR, the company's legal department, and external regulators, making sure everything was documented before they even had a chance to react. And I'll never forget the call I got 3 days later, because the tone in my boss's voice was completely different now. No confidence, no control, just panic, asking if we could talk things through like this was just a misunderstanding. And I almost laughed because now she finally understood what she had done. But I didn't meet her. I didn't respond emotionally. I let the process do exactly what it was supposed to do. And within weeks, everything started collapsing for them. Internal investigations were opened, emails were pulled, their relationship exposed in ways they couldn't deny, and suddenly, the same company that had quietly fired me was now trying to protect itself from them. And my husband? Well, he wasn't so confident anymore either, because when the legal notices reached him, when he realized his job, his reputation, and even his financial future were at risk, he started calling, texting, showing up, trying to explain, trying to apologize, but it was too late, because I had already stepped out of the role they gave me, the weak, silent victim, and become the one thing they never prepared for: the person who could take everything from them without ever raising her voice. In the end, I didn't need to scream, expose them online, or beg for justice, because the system they thought they controlled ended up destroying them instead. My boss was quietly terminated after the investigation confirmed everything: misconduct, abuse of authority, and a completely inappropriate relationship that violated company policy. And my husband lost his position soon after, not just because of the affair, but because of how deeply involved he was in the scheme to push me out. And the irony is, the same people who once looked at me like I was nothing were now the ones trying to avoid eye contact when the truth came out. And as for me, I didn't just win the case. I walked away with a settlement that gave me a fresh start, a clean break from everything they tried to take from me. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something I didn't think I'd feel again: peace. Because karma doesn't always come loud or dramatic. Sometimes it comes quietly, legally, and at the exact moment it hurts the most. So if you're going through something like this right now, don't rush, don't react. Build, because the right kind of revenge doesn't just hurt, it ends everything. And if this story hit you, make sure you subscribe to When Karma Hits for more stories where karma always wins.